Hey everybody, this is Perch. This comment got a lot of play over the weekend. I kind of hate that it did. It's absolutely internet bait. You're seeing it up on the screen here, and it's from Ron Mars, writer who did a number of comics, and in particular, again, if I was to talk to Ron Mars, one of the questions I would have is that he wrote this Green Lantern book when in comes Kyle Rayner and Hal Jordan is Parallax and everything else, and there was a very negative fan reaction back then in the shop. One, I'm curious if he heard that, if he was aware of that kind of negative fan reaction. But if so, what kind of mystifies me is the way a lot of current creators talk about how fans have gotten toxic, and now they're angry. And I scratch my head a little bit at that because he might remember, because he was writing this book where people were not happy with that move, and there was a very angry backlash about it. And that was in the 90s or 80s. I mean, that was a long time ago. I should have looked up the date here, but it was a long time ago, meaning, hey, if you do something, my comment is, I don't think this aspect of fandom has changed. I don't think it's as hostile and bad as it's portrayed. I think people portray it that way for drama reasons, which is part of what we're about to get into. But it's not new. So this whole way of branding it today, toxic fans and all this kind of stuff, feels a little bit, it's eye rolling to me, because we're not talking about anything particularly new. We're putting a new face on it for why? A social media cloud, I guess. Social media definitely takes a bullhorn and makes it louder, but it's silly to say it's new. I'm not saying that's his point of view. I'm just saying, in general, I think you take the long view. But this comment on the screen, again, I think is bait. Why was this posted? To get attention. Absolutely. It's to get people to come in and kind of throw punches. So that's why later in the day, Mars is like, I can't believe people came in and wanted to argue with me. It's like, no, sure you can. I mean, that's why you post stuff. He doesn't go more than a couple days posting something about how, Comicsgate are terrible people, or whatever the villain is. But this comment is interesting. This is what I want you to think about, which is not in relation to Ron. And please don't go at Ron. Don't say, hey, did you see that Perch did a video? Don't do that. I mean, even the guy who said, hey, Perch, you should listen to Perch and sit down and talk to some of these guys. They don't want to hear this. Don't do that. It's not worth your time or mine. But what's interesting about this comment, casual football fans telling their teams who to take in the NFL draft had the exact same energy as internet randos telling you how to make comics. This is an interesting one because obviously there's this thing called an armchair quarterback. Have you heard this? It's a phrase that has been around, I think, since the start of football. I mean, this is an old phrase. I remember hearing this phrase thrown around when I was a very young child. So we're talking a long time ago. And the idea was that a armchair quarterback is a fan, it's a customer, it's somebody watching TV, yelling at the TV set what the quarterback should do, or what the team should do. Somebody who's saying, I could coach this team better. And this is always how it feels in sports. Is fans are they collect stats. Have you been to a baseball game and seen somebody who's got their own little notebook collecting stats and everything else? That's common. That's inherent to sports. People do that for all sports: basketball, football, everything. The fans do this, and what you'll notice is a remarkable lack of coaches and players yelling at the fans on social media. You can go and look up different coaches. In my area, Pete Carroll manages the Seattle Seahawks. He's is a coach for the Seattle Seahawks. And you don't see a lot of comments. In fact, I went looking to try and find any comment where he talks about kind of fans who tell him what to do. And the closest I can get to is a quote from Pete Carroll, where he basically says, I love fan engagement. I love the people showing up, and of course everybody has their own ideas of how to run the team. And, we just try and go out there and win games. And, if I win games, I'll get to keep my job. And if I lose too many games, maybe one of them will take my job. And he kind of chuckles. And that's pretty much all there is to it. But you don't see this same kind of thing that you do in comics, where football coaches and players or any sports team are obsessing about how, what the fans are saying about managing their team. But it doesn't mean that the fans aren't doing that. Quite the contrary. If you go and you search any sports team, you will see dwarfing anything that happens in comics. You'll see opinions on the draft. You'll see opinions on who should start. You'll see opinions on when somebody should be benched. I mean, you see a wide range of opinions on sports. There's no shortage of them. There's TV shows that have been set up specifically with fans. There is far more YouTube channels on sports commentary and sports fans talking about how they would manage the team and doing fantasy leagues and everything else. And yet, why no backlash? Why isn't Pete Carroll coming out like Ron Mars here and yelling at the fans? Well, one of the biggest reasons is because at some point, the NFL, as well as other leagues, but we'll stick with football for a moment, the NFL realized that fan engagement at that level was profitable. And fantasy football as a concept was something that they could make a lot of money off of, and they could license, and everybody could make a lot of money off of it. ESPN, today there are lots of fantasy football leagues and styles. And if you go to NFL.com or you go to these sites, you'll see a heavy reach out to fans of, how would you do this? They took this groundswell of people who had, opinions and maybe thought that the coaches or the teams were idiots. And instead of passive aggressively bitching about it on social media, they decided to get rich off of it. And they have. The entire concept of fantasy football is to do your own draft with your own team, try and make the perfect team, and basically show that, you could do it better. Video games and other things licensed by the NFL, or that license the NFL, are all about that. It's make your own team, make your own dream roster. In fact, some of the Madden games openly state, do it better than the coaches. And they've had coaches come on to do some of the, the promotion of this, saying, hey, we'll see if the fans can do better than me. And they take it as kind of a competitive, friendly thing. You can look at it across the board, and sports have the same things comics have times 100. Sports fans will sit in the stands and scream out things at the audience. And what happens basically, if a coach is leading a team to a successful winning record, they keep their job. If they fill the stands and don't have a winning record, they still usually keep their job. And if attendance is down and they're losing games, they lose their job. It's pretty basic, pretty binary in that sense. And when I compare it to comics, it's amazing, kind of this strange attitude of wanting to attack the fan base, as opposed to leveraging it and licensing it. I still find it bizarre in a creative field that Marvel or DC or anyone wouldn't set up an aspect to their site that's like fantasy booking. You run the comics. To his credit, Tom Brevoort did something along those lines, kind of did a fantasy comic draft kind of thing, where a couple fans would come in and they would submit things and he would put notes into what they were doing. That seems healthy. At the very least, it seems profitable. With all these characters and the interest in comics, why shouldn't the big companies basically take advantage of this? You've got all these people saying all this stuff on YouTube, on social media, everything else. You got these fans who are complaining about comics or trying to tell you that they can make them better. Why wouldn't you go profit off of them? Ego is the reason why. And maybe one of the clues here is that these football players and coaches and everybody involved, they're making millions of dollars. And so they're confident in themselves. They're confident enough that they can take fans maybe yelling at them saying, hey, you suck as a coach, or why didn't you play this guy, or your second string is better than your first string, why are you letting this bum, or whatever it happens to be. They can take it because they're well paid and they're confident. Whereas in comics, it seems like, they're not paid and they seemingly can't take it. I always find this desire to lean into, Here come the fans again telling me how to make comics, bunch of jerks. And it's like, but you have the job. You've got the blue check mark. You've got the credits. You've got the job. Why do you care? Why do you care? Why does that bother you? And again, I compare it. I bring this home. Compare it to fantasy football and some of these other things. Not only do the people in pro sports not care, they actually took it and made a win out of it. They took it and made it so that they could make money off this thing, so they can make money off the games and the fantasy booking simultaneously. It's bizarre. And yet comics people seem obsessed with this idea. I mean, some of the responses here, here comes this other guy. I am constantly surprised at how surprised I am when people absolutely unqualified in a particular field inform professionals how they should be doing it. You mean like when the fan sits on the couch and wants to tell the coach how to play the game? I think, frankly, newsflash, I think that bluntly, I think it'd be easier to break into comics and do that job as opposed to be a professional coach for one of the NFL teams. I think that the bar is a little bit higher there. So, if anyone's going to be upset with this, unqualified people, I think pro sports is far more likely to have some ground there. But again, the pro sports people and teams don't care. They're good. They move on. They take it and they're like, hey, we'll set up this fantasy thing. You can tell us how you would do it. And by the way, we're gonna make money off you. You know what I mean? Again, this is not to beat up on Ron Mars or anyone else, because this sentiment gets portrayed a lot. But he did a great thing in that he brought it home for me by specifically comparing it to the NFL draft. And it's like, yeah, casual football fans telling their teams who to take in the NFL draft have the same energy as internet randos telling you how to make comics. Well, here would be my answer. Why don't you make it the same energy? Why don't you actually figure out a way to make a lot of money off this, like the NFL has? That would be good for you. It would be good for comics. It would be basically take this away from being this adversarial relationship into something at least financially positive. I mean, maybe there is a reason why, yeah, sports fans are very aggressive and very sure about their opinions on things. No doubt about that. Again, if you want to, the football commentary, sport commentary videos on YouTube far outstrip anything going on in comics with far more passion, far more anger. Yet you do not see the same level of toxic fandom kind of stuff for teams. Instead, they just turn it into money. Feels like a good idea to me, but what do I know? Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and thanks for listening.